Hello class, let's continue with the pencil sharpener. This is just a quick review of what was covered in class last time. I will not be going into as much depth, but I will be showing you how to do all the stuff that we did last time and giving you a few reminders. Okay, so first we want to make sure that our model is all set for Substance Painter, and I know that I believe I did some of this in the last video, but let's just cover it again real quick. So one, and while we're here, we can clean up our scene to make sure that it's ready for submission and you won't lose points on it. Okay, so we want to check and make sure our UVs are good, right? No UVs are touching each other. No UVs are touching the edge of the one-to-one space, and we're taking up as much of the one-to-one space as possible. We want minimal distortion and minimal seams. So as few shells as possible with as little distortion as possible. Additionally, we want to make sure our model is actually smooth with 2 divisions, right? So make sure that's actually happened and you're not just sitting on smooth preview. To double check that, you can select this and press 1 and make sure that it doesn't change, right? 1 and 3. 3 will turn it on to smooth preview. 1 will turn it off. So with 1, your wireframe should look something like this, right? A lot of polygons. If you smooth it, it will also get rid of any n-gons, but you could also double check and make sure you don't have any n-gons. N-gons being faces with more than 4 sides, right? I can go back to just general, make sure that all the pieces of your sharpener are named, right? If there are default names or pieces or parts of the model are not named, you'll lose points. Make sure that they're grouped in a single group and that group is named. If that's not the case, you can select all the pieces, right? And hit Control G and it will group them. A group icon looks like this sort of rectangle with a red arrow, right? A mesh icon is this diamond sort of grid. So there should only be one group. Don't have groups inside of here. If you do, let's say you have something like this, like another group that's just kind of hanging out in here, you can open it up, select the mesh pieces, middle mouse click and drag them out like that. Then we could delete that group. Make sure your history is deleted in the whole scene, so edit, delete all by type, and history. If you've done all of those things, then you should be good to go. So you're going to select the sharpener, right, and file, export selection, choose FBX export, make sure it's going in the data folder of your project folder, and then hit export selection after you name it. All right, on to the next step. Inside of Substance Painter, we're going to go to File, New, right? Again, you probably already done this from the last thing. Make sure it's set to 2048. Hit Select where it says File, choose your sharpener, FBX, and hit OK. I'll just go ahead and do this again real quick. Make sure it imports properly. There's only one material up here, and you can see all of your UVs. Go to click on this little croissant and change this to 2048, uncheck ID, check this box, use low polymesh as high polymesh, change this to subsampling, super sampling 4x, and that's good. Then hit bake. It will bake the textures. Remember that if Substance Painter is not working on your computer as expected, you need to go to the labs. All right, once that's done, I can click on this little paintbrush icon to bring me back to the paint mode. Next, I'm going to kind of cover what we covered in class. Let's set up Substance Painter in the same fashion like the camera settings and environment to better mimic Unreal Engine and get better results. So feel free to follow along with what I'm doing here. So I'm going to go to this monitor where it says display setting, and I'm going to change the environment. I'm going to type in TOM, and I want this Studio Tomoko. It's going to darken everything and change the lighting, right? Like this. In this same window, I'm going to scroll down and let me just double check something. Activate post effects. Activate post effects. We want, let me go like this. We want to check this tone mapping and change the function from linear to sensitometric. It's going to darken it even more. Scroll down further. activate color profile. Where it says profile, click here, and we want sRGBF like this. Leave that, and that's good. All right, those settings are good for that window. Next, let's go to layers, and I'm going to create a new fill layer, which is this paint bucket icon. This will be my curvature overlay, so I'm going to double click on fill layer 1 and rename it to curve overlay. I'm going to select the layer, and down here in the properties, which I'm going to make a little larger, I'm going to leave all that. I'm going to scroll down, and I'm going to turn off everything except for color. So just color is highlighted. Then where it says base color, I'm going to click on base color, and I'll type in CURV, and you'll see here's the curvature map. So I'll click on that, and it will fill it with the curvature. We need the blending mode to be overlay, so I'll come over here and change this from normal to overlay. There it is. And I'm going to turn the opacity down here to something like 60 and hit enter. So 60, overlay. I'll right click on this and give it a red color just to remind myself that this should be the top layer. It should live above everything else. The reason why we're doing this is it's highlighting our edges and kind of just making the model pop a bit more, which is great. All right, next step, I'm going to delete layer 1 here. That's a paint layer, which we mostly don't use. I'm going to create folders here to represent different pieces, right? So you can organize this or mix and match in one of two ways, or mix two ways. I recommend having a folder either for different materials. So for example, this could be a steel, like a rusted steel. This might be a rusted tin. This would also be a rusted steel. The back, this piece is an enameled steel. This is rusted steel, and this is wood. It's like a stained wood or a painted wood, right? So you could have folders to represent each one of those materials. You could also have folders to represent each piece, or you can have a combination of both, whatever makes sense to you. So for now, I'm just going to make folders as described. So folder 1, I'm going to rename rusted steel. I'll do another folder. This one I'll name rusted tin. I'll do another one, which will be enameled steel, and one more, which will be stained wood, right? This curvature, I spelled that wrong. Let's see. Whoa. There we go, curve overlay. I'm omitting the E. I'm going to drag this back to the top because it should live in the top, right? All right. I'm going to reorder these a little bit. So I'm going to put rusted steel at the top, rusted tin underneath that, enameled steel above stained wood. And this is my starting, like how I'm going to start. If I want to go ahead and do this now, I can. So essentially this dotted box, you can click on this, and every folder and every layer is going to have this sort of box. And if you select it, it's going to show you all the parts that that folder will apply to. If you uncheck something, it will mask off that piece. This is really powerful. Yeah, so what I'm going to do is I'll just select this on the rusted steel. Then I'll click on these 3 lines and say exclude all. Then I'm going to click on the pieces that will be rusted steel. So I want this back piece here, this one, and we'll say this and this. So those pieces will be rusted steel. Next, I'll go to rusted tin. I'm going to do the same thing. So make sure this is selected, exclude all. This is the rusted tin. That's it. So you can see there's 1 piece selected, 4 pieces selected. This one, enameled steel, let's exclude all. And I'll click here and here. So those pieces will be enameled steel. Then I'll go to stained wood. Same thing, exclude all. And I'll click on this piece. This part in here is not wood. This part is metal, right? So what I'll do is right click on this. Oops. I'm going to go ahead and select this square here to just select the folder. Then I will right click and you can't see it, but I'm right clicking and adding a black mask, which is near the top, right? So I've added a black mask and I've masked off everything that is selected, which is this one piece. So there's nothing under there that's visible. I'm going to, on the left side, click on this polygon fill, and I'm going to choose this UV chunk fill, and I want to unmask let's see, where is that? Is that this? Oh, there we go, it updated. All right, actually, you know what? I'm going to clear the mask for now, and we'll do this. You can do this later, but or actually here, I'll do this so we can see it a bit better, right? Like, let's say I want, don't do this, but let's just do something super obvious like this clay terracotta, and I'm going to put it in this folder just so we can see. If I don't have a mask here, remove mask, right? It looks like that material, right? Which is not correct. That's not what we want. But if I right click on this folder, add a black mask, it covers it completely, right? Then I can click on this polygon fill, choose this UV chunk fill, and I can click and drag on the UV pieces that I want to unmask. And basically I want to unmask these three parts, right? Because this inner portion, which is part of this piece, is going to be metal, not wood. So I've unmasked that. So now I know my mask is accurate, and I can go ahead and delete this clay terracotta material. So the mask looks like that. If I hover over it, you can see that black mask, the shells that I unmasked. Great. Okay. So I'm going to go back to, I'll click on this mask, and I'm just going to go back to this paintbrush to go back to the normal mode. Next step would be to actually go in and start creating the materials. Remember that if you're in this view, you need to just click on over here, right? So to create the materials, you have two different options. You can either create it from scratch by looking at material properties like on the internet, or you can start from over here, one of these materials, and drag it into the folder. So if I wanted to do that, I could type in metal, and I could look for a metal that has a good starting point. Let's try this metal sandblasted. I'll drag it into rusted steel, make sure it's actually in there. And I'm going to rotate the light around to make sure I can see it just fine. If I want to only have this view, I can come over here and choose 3D only. And I could also go, I can go back and forth, right? So I don't want to see the texture seams in this. So up here, projection, most of your layers should be changed to triplanar projection, right? And that's going to help hide all the texture seams. Also, let's see. Yeah, so you could start messing with these attributes to try and match it. But then you would build out the material more, right? We need to add additional layers for things like scratches and damage and rust and color variation, roughness variation too. Let's go ahead and do what I did in class and make one from scratch. So I'll click on this rusted steel folder, then I'll click on this fill layer. I'll name this, let's see, bare, I'll just name it steel. If I go to the internet and I type in steel hex color code, I can get some basic values like this one, metallic steel hex code B5CO-C9. But there's going to be a bunch of different ones, and it really depends on what you're looking for. There's also the 7A7F80. Let's try that. So you could either copy that or just remember it. So I'm going to come down here in the steel layer, click on base color. Oops, sorry, click on this little gray box. And here I can type in that value. So if I can go back to it, 747F80. So I can try 747F80 and press enter. Next, roughness, we'll come back to that. Metallic, I'm going to turn this all the way up to 1 because it is metal, right? I'm going to turn off these emissive. You probably don't have emissive. I'm going to turn that off, turn off OP, turn off normal. Cool. For roughness, I'm going to click on the word roughness and I'll type in here grunge. And I'll choose one. Let's try this grunge cobweb. And actually, let's separate the roughness out. So I'm going to turn roughness off. So there is no roughness value. It's just pretty flat. It's only based on the metallic right now. I'll turn height off. So I'll just have color and metal. Then I'll do another layer. This one is going to be just roughness. And I'll call this layer rough pass 1. I'll click on roughness and I'll type in grunge. I'll get this grunge cobweb like so. I'll change this UV projection to triplanar projection. And then I'm going to grab this tiling and change the scaling a little bit. That's good. This is far too shiny, right? If we are looking at the reference images, we want to make sure that we're trying to, that we're matching that. So I'll grab this number here, which is the opacity, and whoops, I need to change this up here to roughness. Then I'll grab this opacity slider and turn it down just a bit so it's not quite so extreme. Right, something like this. And this is what I'm doing is pretty fast and rough. So you don't have to do the same values that I'm doing, but essentially following the same principles. So I would do something like this, and you could change the blending mode to overlay, and then maybe do another roughness pass that uses a different type of grunge map to blend into this one. Just remember that when you're done with that, you're going to want to change this mode from this channel from roughness back to base color and continue working. I could actually just copy this layer, copy layers, paste, Control C, Control V to paste it. I'll rename this to rough pass 2. And in here, let's go back to, click on this little X, click on roughness and choose a different one, right? Change it to, we can play with the tiling and roughness, change this value, whoops, to be stronger or lighter. That's kind of extreme. I'll turn it down a bit. We're going to want to add color variation too, so I might create a new fill layer beneath the roughness pass 1. Just call it color variation 1. We want this to be triplanar. Turn off everything except for color. Go back here and change this to base color. Click on base color, or actually click on this color here. Let's choose like a sort of vivid purple, dark purple, something like this. Then I will right click on this, add a black mask. Let's try that. Then I'll right click on the mask and right click on the mask, go down to add fill, where it says fill, grayscale, click on this. Let's find another grunge texture, something with less contrast. Change it to, make sure you have this selected, change it to triplanar. And then let's control this opacity and turn it down a little bit. And up here, let's change this to maybe multiply. And we can kind of play with this just to, we want it to be pretty subtle, right? Like there's just a hint of that. So we could now duplicate this and give it another color like a yellow. And again, we want it to be very subtle so that we're building up and creating some variety just within our base material. So Control C, Control V, color variation, we'll name this 2. Then I'll come over to this box here, scroll down, choose a different color. Let's go with that yellow I was talking about. Then I'll click on the mask and click on this grunge dirt scale, and I'll click on this X to get a new mask. Let's try one of these. Nope, I don't like that. Or that. Let's see. Grunge, metal, grunge galvanic, grunge rust fine, grunge. Let's do grunge galvanic. We can play with the tiling a little bit. And then I can turn this value down significantly so it's not blowing it out. Cool. Let's go above rough pass and create a new fill layer and name this noise. Turn off everything except for color. Come over here where it says base color and type in noise. And we want the multicolored fractal noise. Let's say Perlin white. Here, I'm just going to replace all of this with fractal sum. Whoops. I think that's what it's called, something like that. Yeah, fractal sum base colored. I'm going to click on that. It'll look like this. So fractal sum base color. Change this to triplanar. Tiling, tile it so that, scale it up like 0.4 or 5, something like that. And then change this to, let's try overlay, and then let's turn the opacity down quite a bit. This is just going to add another layer to help break up the surface, right? So this is a good base for the metal underneath, right? And you could, we can continue to change the color. Like if we think this is too bright or too dark, for example, I could come in here and just tweak this, like maybe turn it, give it, tint it, add white to it, and that might help. Or choose a different hex code color. But once we have that, then we can go ahead and add, underneath the noise, we can add rust. Over here, we have this metal rust. At this stage, I'm going to show you, I'm going to show you how to make, how to use smart masks, right? So I'm going to drag metal rust underneath noise and above rough pass 2. It's going to fill the whole thing. Let's go up here, change it to triplanar to help hide our texture seams. And then we're going to go over here to smart masks. And here we can choose, as a starting point, we can choose to mask off what we don't want to be rusty. So for example, this whole tube is not super rusty. If I go back to my 3D, 2D view, I can, just on this material, or this layer, the metal rust layer, I can right click, add a black mask. Now with the black mask, again, I could come over here to this polygon fill and choose UV chunk fill. And I can essentially choose which parts I want to be filled, right? So maybe I don't want this to be rusty, but I want the other parts to receive the rust, right? So I could do that. I could also, let's do our smart mask actually. So like I was doing, I'm getting distracted. All right, so let's just grab, up here I can type in rust just to see what we have here. Cavity rust, this probably won't show a lot. Yeah, let's try edge rust. Okay, that's a little better. I'm gonna click on this paintbrush so we can see. But it's still very strong, right? And it's not in the exact areas that I want it to be in. So we can continue to edit this. If I go to this mask editor down here, it'll load, and then I can change, let's go back to here so I can see this. I can change the global balance, right, to be so there's more or less rust, right? I can invert it. I could do all sorts of stuff to this. Something like this. Right, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time getting this fine, but if you don't like this smart mask, choose a different one, see which one works for you. But essentially what we want to do is we get a smart mask this close, adjust its parameters by clicking on the mask editor, then go back here to this box, right click, go down near the bottom and choose add paint. Now we have paint right here. Make sure this is selected. We can come over here to brush and choose a brush. I like working with the dirt brushes, so I'll choose dirt 2. And I can scroll to the bottom. White will uncover the mask, right? So I can add rust by having that on white, and black will cover it up, right? So I can come in and like paint away rust. That's usually that's probably what I would start with, is like paint away areas where it shouldn't be. And again, you're going to need to use your reference images to really understand where the rust is on this, right? But I can kind of ding up some areas and start custom, like adding this in different areas, right? So you're just going to work your way through. And if I look at the actual reference images, let's go ahead and do that. All right. So if we go to like the front, we can see there's actually very little rust. And we have this sort of like patch of wear in here, probably from where people's fingers have hit over and over by putting the pencil in, or something like that. There's also marks, it looks like, from like scratch marks where the pencil has maybe actually scratched it up. So there's like a little bit of rust up here and some flecks of rust that are kind of all over, right? You could also create your own rust material. On the side and top, like up here, there's quite a bit of rust, right? And on the side, there's patches here. So you should be using, and there's quite a bit on this handle, you should be using these images and the orthographic images in the reference to, like, let's see, top. Yeah, right. This one's really good to kind of understand where all the details are. All right, let's move forward. Let's talk about height stamps and height differences. So if you create a new folder, I will put this one at the top above all the other folders, but below curvature overlay, and name it height, right? And in here, we can create a new fill layer, and you would name it whatever it's going to be. So maybe I'm working on like the lines that are up here. So maybe I could name this top lines, and I would turn every channel off except for height. Give it a positive value because those come outward, and then right click on this and add a black mask, right? Then I'm going to come over here to my brushes. I'll choose a basic hard brush, and you could do this some kind of carefully, but I think there are 3. Use your images, right? But now if I paint, it's going to uncover the mask, right? So if I'm painting, so I can use the bracket keys to increase or decrease the size of the brush, or just come over here to the properties once the brush is selected, and you can change all the parameters of the brush in here. But essentially I can click once at the start, hold shift, and then click where it ends, right? And I can do the same for the other 2 lines. And then once I have something, try and make it a little more accurate than I've done. Once I have something basic, I can always come back to this initial space and edit it to make it, to change how it looks, like how deep or how intense it is. If I want these to be a little softer, I can select the mask, right click, add, right click, add, add filter, click on filter, choose blur, and I can adjust the blur intensity. Because there's one right along the seam here, it's creating problems with that texture seam. So let's see, might have to use a different parameter for this, or just not blur it at all. Maybe something light like that looks fine. Cool. All right, let's cover making an alpha stamp. So inside of Photoshop, if I go to File, Open, and I'm going to go ahead and find my reference. If I go to my project folder, go to Source Images, Pencil Sharpener Ref, Detailed Shots, I can find the Boston logo, and I'll hit Open. Now I've got it here. I'm going to go to Image. Let's see how large this is. Image, canvas size. So I'm going to change this to 2048 by 2048 and hit OK and hit Proceed. Now I have a canvas size that is good for texture size. If I needed to move this image around, I still could. I could still grab it. I could hit V and click and drag and move it around. Maybe I'll center it. I'm going to select this layer after I center it and lock it. Then I'll create a new layer. And I'm going to hit G and come over here and make sure I'm in my paint bucket tool. Then I'll grab black and fill it. Then I'm going to create a new layer, and this layer too, I'm going to name as like background. And this will be, I'll just name that stamp. And then this background layer, I'm going to turn the opacity down quite a bit. Then I'll go to stamp, and I'll choose this polygonal lasso tool. And I'm using an older version of Photoshop, I think. So generally it should be the same though. I'm going to go ahead and use this reference to, I'm just going to be quick here, but to sort of get this selection. Then I'll hit G and I'll use white and fill that with white. Control D will deselect that. Then I'm going to hit T for my text tool and caps lock, and I'll type in Boston. I'm using a funky font right now, which is no good, so I'll choose a different font that is closer to the actual logo. I'm just going to use this Arial font for now, but take the time to try and find one that looks good. I'm going to also change the Arial to narrow bold. Then bring this over here, Control T will open up the transform options, and you can scale this up or you can change the font size. Either will work. And I'm just gonna get this closer to what it actually is. Then I'll come back in here, delete the O's, and space these out. And you can also select, you can use the arrow keys after you select a layer and move, like nudge it per pixel. So something like this is good. Then I'll use the text tool again and just caps lock O. Bring this down here, Control T. Let's scale it up, and I can hold Shift to like scale it not uniformly and rotate this and kind of center it. If you hold Alt, you can scale it in place from the center point. So something like this. If you are in your Move tool, hit V or come over here, and then if you hold Alt and click and drag on something, you can duplicate it over. So I get this, then I'll hit T again and do an L. Control T to scale this up. Something like that. Then I'll go back to the background and turn opacity all the way up. Now I get this, and I can take a closer look. Like I want to kind of space these out a little differently, maybe. Might need to use the arrow keys a little. So something like this. Let's move this all over just to center it. It's going to be a little inaccurate compared to the picture, but this is a lot closer to what we're looking for. Picture has distortion and stuff. All right, so once I have this, then I can go File, Export, quick export as PNG is fine. Save this in your source images folder, and I would just name it like Boston, Boston Alpha. Hit save. You could copy that from the video, possibly. If you do, it might be low res, but you could give that a shot if you can't get it to work. But try and build it on your own. All right. So in here, let's say we want to add that to the proper side. I think it's this side. I'd have to check the references, but I'm just going to do this quickly. So in the height, I'm going to create another fill layer. Make sure it goes inside height. And this one I'll name Boston. And I will turn off everything but height and turn the height value up, right click, add black mask. Then I need to go to my brush. I'll do a basic hard again where it says alpha. This is what we need to change. But before we do that, we need to import our actual alpha. And so here are all the alphas, right? So if I click on this little plus icon, it'll pull up import resources. I'll click add resources, and we're going to go to the source images folder, which is where we save the alpha. I'll hit open, where it says undefined, change this to alpha, import your resources to your current project, PBR metallic roughness, and then import. There it is. So now I can drag this over here. And you can see if I click, it's going to add it. So I can change my brush size and click, and there we go. Now it's in there. This one, maybe I want to add the filter. So right click, add filter, blur or bevel. Let's try blur. Turn the intensity down a little bit, and then we get rid of some of the aliasing that we were getting. So something like this is nice. All right. All right, so again, you're going to want to try and get this as close as you possibly can. It'd be nice to see the front alpha here as well, the to remove stamp. Yeah, so just the closer you get it to looking like the reference, the better your grade will be. And your texturing skills, you're just starting this, so try not to be too hard on yourself, but also just push yourself, right? You need to make sure you spend enough time on this, so don't try and do it all in one work session. Yeah. All right, so next thing we need to do is once you're done texturing, we need to render it in IRAY. And we need 4 renders for this. Click on this little IRAY camera, and it'll bring us over here. You can choose whatever environment you want. Just choose one that doesn't have a lot of color to it. If I click on this little display settings, right, I can scroll up to the top. Right now we're in Studio Tomako. So, but you could change it to something else if you really want to. I'll leave it here for now. I don't want to see any images in the background. You should scroll down here and check this clear color. That's good. And everything else you can leave as the default. But if you want to, you could turn on this vignette and you can control the strength of it. Don't do something like this, but just make it somewhat subtle if you're going to use the vignette. Shift right click, make sure that your renders, we start with an establishing shot where the light is like front facing, right? Like we're not looking at the shadow side. I'm going to change the environment here to something that doesn't have multiple cast shadows. So I'm going to delete this. Let's look at, I like Studio 3 sometimes. Yeah. That has strong cast shadows, multiples. Let's try something else. This one's not bad. It's a little high contrast, but all right. So we'd want to start with a shot that is a 3/4 shot, something like this, right? We also want this to render fully before we save it. If I go up here where this magnifying glass is, it says rendering. We want to override viewport resolution and try saving this at 1920 by 1080, or in our case, maybe it would be better to do 1080 by 1920. That's no, don't do that. But yeah, let's control it at least. So I'll go back to 1920 here. Yeah, 1920 by 1920 is not bad. Let's see, 1080. I'm going to go 1920 by 1500. That looks good. But if I change this, it'll mean that all of the renders I take are going to be in the same size and the same resolution, which is good. That's what we want. All right, so you change your angle, get the shot that you want. Make sure the first one or two are establishing shots that show the whole thing. Make sure we're filling up. Let me go a little closer. We're going to fill up the frame with the object, but not be too close to the top or the bottom or the sides. So something like this. Wait till this says done in green. All right, once it does, if everything looks good, then you can click on this save render, and you would save this in your images folder of your project folder, right? And I would save this as like, you could say render one, save. Save it as a JPEG, not a PNG, just because the default viewer that I'll look at these on will turn transparency on if you save it as a PNG. All right, for other shots, you could choose a different angle. If there's a particular like material or section that you're proud of, you can give us some close-up shots, right? And yeah, if your image is not like clean when this says done, first thing you should do is turn up max time. Change this from 10 seconds to like 20 seconds. If that still doesn't fix it and the iterations are at 1000, then you can increase these max samples. So essentially you'll want to play with the max samples and the max time to get better results. But if you're rendering for, let's say you're rendering for like 2 minutes, so 120 seconds and 2000 samples and you're still having problems, then you probably need to use a different computer. Yeah, if it gets all the way up to 2000. But that, yeah, you can see here, this only ended up doing 151 iterations, and there's a little bit of grain here, so maybe I want to increase this time to like 15, but this is pretty good. So, yeah. All right, lastly, let's talk about preparing your project folder for submission so you don't lose points. Let's open up my project folder. All right, so what I recommend doing is actually duplicating this folder and cleaning it up so that you don't delete stuff that you actually need. So if you go back to wherever this is saved and copy and paste it, then open it up, and I'm going to run through how your folder should be organized. When I open your folder, it should be named like this: last name underscore your first initial of your first name underscore sharpener. And then all these folders should look the same in yours. The first thing I'm going to check is the data folder. Inside of here, there should be your sharpener and the FBX. There should also be one single substance painter save. If there are additional substance painter saves, you would need to delete them. There should just be the most recent one. And that's it for the data folder for this project. Then I'll open up the images folder, and there should be 4 renders in here, right? Render 1, 2, 3, 4. If you wanted to do some sort of wild render playing around with the colors and other IRAY options, that's totally fine, but that should not be one of the 4 renders you do. Make a 5th render for something like that. All right, so there should be 4 renders in there from IRAY. Then in the scenes folder, there should be one single scene of your sharpener, and it should be the most recent version. So like if 03 is the most recent version, that would be the only one I include here. And then lastly, source images for this assignment. Any alphas you create should be in here, and you can leave the, or you can, it doesn't matter. You can either delete these reference shots or you can leave them for the submission. I don't care. Either way is fine. Yeah, and that's what I'm looking for and how you should organize your project for submission. Yeah, that's all I have. Good luck. I'll see you in class.